What happens when a Hollywood legend refuses to play along with a late-night host's agenda? The tension in the studio was immediate. Kevin Costner walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live stage to applause, but something was different in his demeanor. He sat down across from Jimmy with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from decades in the industry. And Jimmy, sensing he had a ratings goldmine on his hands, decided to push buttons right from the start. Before we dive into what became one of the most talked about interviews of the year, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment below telling us which side you're on. This is going to get intense. Jimmy started with his usual banter, the kind of softball questions designed to warm up a guest, but Costner wasn't biting. When Jimmy asked about his latest project with that trademark smirk, Costner gave a straightforward answer, without the Hollywood fluff. No funny anecdotes, no self-deprecating humor, just the facts. The audience could feel something was off. Then Jimmy went for it. He brought up a recent controversy, something about creative differences on one of Costner's productions, and he did it with that passive-aggressive tone that makes it seem like he's joking, but everyone knows he isn't. He said, "So, Kevin, there's been some talk about you being, let's say, difficult to work with. Is that fair? Or are people just not used to someone who knows what they want?" The audience gave that awkward laugh, the kind that happens when people aren't sure if they should be laughing. Costner didn't laugh. He just looked at Jimmy for a long moment, and you could see him deciding something. Then he said, "Difficult to work with, or someone who doesn't compromise on quality, because there's a difference, Jimmy, and I think you know that." Jimmy tried to recover with a joke, saying, "Oh, here we go. Hollywood integrity speech number 47. But Costner cut him off. "No, not an integrity speech. Just a question. When you're doing your show, do you let the network tell you every joke to make, every guest to have on, every segment to run, or do you have some say in what your name goes on?" The studio got quiet. Jimmy, caught off guard, said, "Well, I mean, it's collaborative, but this is my show, so exactly." Costner interrupted. "It's your show, and my films are my films. So when someone calls me difficult because I won't compromise my vision, I have to wonder what they're really saying. Are they saying I should just go along with whatever gets decided in a boardroom somewhere? Or are they saying I should care about the work I put my name on?" Jimmy, trying to regain control, leaned back and said, "Okay, but there's caring about your work, and then there's being impossible to please. I mean, come on, Kevin. You've got to admit some of the stories that have come out." He left it hanging there, expecting Costner to get defensive. Instead, Costner leaned forward. "Tell me one story. Let's talk about it right here, right now. Give me one example of me being impossible to please, and let's walk through what actually happened versus what got reported. Because I think that's the problem, Jimmy. People hear a headline, and they think they know the whole story." Jimmy shifted in his seat. He wasn't expecting this level of pushback. He said, "Well, I don't have specifics right in front of me, but the general sense is that, you can be pretty intense on set." Costner didn't break eye contact. General sense from who? From people who were there, or from bloggers who need clicks, because there's a difference between being intense and being committed. I don't apologize for expecting the same level of commitment from others that I bring myself. The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't the fun celebrity banter they came for. This was real tension, real confrontation. Jimmy tried another angle, a lighter one. He said, Okay, I get it. You're serious about your craft. We all respect that. But you've got to admit, Kevin, Hollywood has changed. It's not the same industry you started in. Sometimes you've got to roll with the punches, right?" Costner's expression didn't change. "Roll with the punches," he repeated. "You mean compromise on things that matter? Lower the bar because it's easier. Is that what you're suggesting?" Jimmy laughed nervously and said, "No, I'm just saying maybe pick your battles. Not everything has to be a fight." And that's when Costner really shut it down. He said, "Jimmy, let me tell you something about picking battles. Every time someone tells you to pick your battles, what they're really saying is shut up and go along with it. And I've been in this industry long enough to know that the moment you start going along with things that don't sit right with you, that's the moment you lose whatever made you worth listening to in the first place." He continued, "You sit here every night and you make jokes about politicians, about corporations, about people in power who you think aren't doing the right thing. That's your job and you're good at it. But then when someone in your own industry decides to hold the line on something they believe in, suddenly they're difficult. Suddenly, they need to learn to roll with the punches. Do you see the contradiction there? Jimmy, visibly uncomfortable now, tried to play it off. He said, I think we've gotten a little too serious here. This is a comedy show, Kevin. We're supposed to be having fun. Costner nodded slowly.
Right.
It's a comedy show, so why bring up controversial topics if you don't want to have a real conversation about them? Why ask the question if you don't want the answer? The audience was riveted. Some were clapping, others were just watching with their mouths open. Jimmy, trying desperately to save face, said, Look, I respect your passion. I really do. I just think maybe you could lighten up a little bit. And that's when Costner delivered the line that would define the entire interview. He said, Jimmy, I've lightened up plenty in my life. I've done the press tours, the talk show circuits, played the game the way you're supposed to play it. But at some point, you realize that being liked isn't the same as being respected. And I'd rather be respected for standing by my principles than liked for pretending I don't have any. The camera caught Jimmy's face, and for a moment, he had nothing. No comeback, no joke, no way to spin it. He just sat there while the audience erupted. Half of them were applauding Costner. The other half were waiting to see what Jimmy would say next. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough. When they came back from commercial, you could feel the shift in energy. Jimmy had clearly been coached during the break, probably told to steer things back to safer territory. But Costner wasn't giving him an inch. Jimmy started with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and said, Welcome back. We're here with Kevin Costner. And things got a little heated before the break, but that's what makes live television exciting, right? Costner didn't return the smile. He just said, It's only heated if someone's uncomfortable with honesty. Jimmy's smile faltered. He pressed on, saying, So, let's talk about something everyone wants to know. Your new project, it's been in development for years, right? What's taking so long? Is it the perfectionist thing again? Or is there something else holding it up? The way he asked it, the implication was clear. He was suggesting Costner was the problem, the bottleneck. Costner took a breath and said, Jimmy, have you ever tried to get something made that hasn't been done before? Something that doesn't fit into a neat little box that executives can understand in a 30 second on pitch. Jimmy shrugged and said, I pitch show ideas all the time. It's not that hard if the idea is good. Costner actually smiled at that, but it wasn't a friendly smile. He said, Right, you pitch show ideas for a format that's existed for 70 years. You pitch within a system that already understands what you're doing. What I'm talking about is trying to do something that doesn't have a template, something that requires people to trust the vision before they can see the finished product. That takes time. That takes the right partners. And yes, that takes refusing to compromise just to get it made faster. Jimmy, sensing he was losing the room again, tried to make it about relatability. He said, Okay, but at some point, don't you have to just go with what you can get? Most people watching right now, they can't afford to wait around for the perfect situation. They've got bills to pay. They take the job that's available, not the job they dream about. What makes you different? The question hung in the air, and for a second it seemed like maybe Jimmy had found his angle. But Costner didn't take the bait. He said, What makes me different is that I've already done it their way. I've already made the films the studios wanted, played the roles they thought were safe, followed the formulas, and you know what? Some of them worked out great. But the ones that mattered, the ones that actually connected with people on a deeper level, those were the ones where I fought for something different. So now at this point in my career, why would I go backward? Why would I settle for less than what I know is possible? Jimmy tried to interrupt, but Costner kept going. And to your point about regular people and bills to pay, let me be clear about something. I respect anyone who works hard to provide for their family. That's not what this is about. But there's a difference between taking a job to survive and letting someone else dictate your entire life's work. Everyone at every level has some area where they can push back, where they can say, This is my line. Maybe it's not as visible as what I do, but it's there. And telling people to just accept whatever they're given, to never push for better, that's not advice. That's surrender. The audience was split. You could hear some people clapping loudly while others sat in silence, processing what they were hearing. Jimmy, getting frustrated now, said, You know what, Kevin? This is exactly what people talk about this right here. You can't just have a normal conversation. Everything has to be this big philosophical statement. Can't you just answer a question without turning it into a lecture? Costner's jaw tightened. He said, I am answering your questions, Jimmy. You're just not liking the answers. There's a difference. You want me to come on here, tell some funny stories, plug my project, and leave. That's the formula, right? But you're the one who decided to go after me about being difficult to work with. You're the one who brought up controversy, so don't get upset when I actually engage with what you're putting out there. Jimmy leaned back, arms crossed. He said, Fine, let's engage. Let's really get into it. You talk about integrity and vision and all of that, but at the end of the day, you're still a millionaire making movies. How much integrity does it really take when you're already set for life? When you don't have anything to lose, it's easy to be principled when you're rich. The audience reacted with a mixture of gasps and nervous laughter. It was a low blow, and everyone knew it. But Costner didn't flinch. He said, You think I don't have anything to lose, Jimmy? I've got everything to lose. My reputation, my legacy, the respect of people whose opinions I actually value. Money doesn't protect you from making bad work. If anything, it makes it worse because there's no excuse. When you have the resources to do something right and you still cut corners, that says something about who you are, he continued. And let's talk about your point. Yes, I'm financially comfortable. That's true. But I got here by making hard choices, by walking away from projects that would have been easy money, but bad films. I got here by betting on myself when other people said I was crazy. So when you ask how much integrity it takes, the answer is all of it every single day. Because the temptation to coast, to take the easy path, that never goes away. If anything, it gets stronger. And the only thing that keeps you from giving in is remembering why you started doing this in the first place. Jimmy, clearly rattled but trying to maintain control, said, Okay, so you're saying everyone else in Hollywood, all the people who are working within the system, making films, on schedule and on budget, they don't have integrity. They're all sellouts. Costner shook his head. He said, That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying everyone has to make their own choices about what they can live with. Some people are fine working within the system, and some of them do great work there, but don't pretend there isn't a cost to it. Don't pretend that every time you say yes to something you don't believe in, it doesn't take a little piece of you. Jimmy scoffed. He said, That's pretty dramatic, don't you think? It's just movies, Kevin. It's entertainment. Nobody's curing cancer here. Costner's eyes went cold. He said, Just movies, right? Just the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we value. Just the myths we create that shape how people see the world. Just entertainment. Jimmy, you of all people should understand the power of media. You use it every night to influence how people think about politics, social issues, current events. But when it comes to films, suddenly it's just entertainment. The audience was completely locked in. This had gone from a celebrity interview to something much deeper, much more real. Jimmy, trying a different approach, softened his tone. He said, Look, Kevin, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. But you've got to admit, you're not making it easy. You come on here with this intensity, this seriousness about everything. Can't you see how that might rub people the wrong way? Costner was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Jimmy, I appreciate that you're trying to smooth things over. But let me be very clear about something. I don't come on shows like this to be liked. I come on because it's part of the job. Because promoting your work is how you get it seen. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone. I'm not just to make you or your audience more comfortable. If my intensity rubs people the wrong way, that's their problem, not mine. I'd rather be authentically myself and have half the room hate me than be fake and have everyone love a version of me that doesn't exist. Jimmy threw his hands up. He said, Wow, okay, so you just don't care what anyone thinks. That must be nice. Costner leaned forward and said, I didn't say I don't care. I said I don't perform. There's a difference. I care deeply about my work, about the people I collaborate with, about the audience that gives their time and money to see what I create. But I don't care about being popular with people who want me to be something I'm not. And honestly, Jimmy, I don't think you do either. I think you care a lot more about being respected than you let on. That's why this is bothering you so much, because somewhere in there, you know I'm right. That last line hit Jimmy hard. You could see it on his face. The way his expression shifted from defensive to something else, something more vulnerable. He sat there for a moment, and the studio was so quiet, you could hear the cameras moving. Then he said quietly, "You think you've got me all figured out, don't you?" Costner's voice softened just slightly. He said, "I think you're smart enough to know when someone's speaking truth, and I think that's what's making this uncomfortable. Not that I'm being difficult, but that you recognize something in what I'm saying. You started out doing comedy because you had something to say, right? You had a point of view, a voice that was yours. And now you've got this massive platform, this show that millions of people watch. But how often do you get to really use it the way you want? How often do you have to soften the edges, pull your punches, make sure you don't offend the wrong people?" Jimmy looked away from Costner, out at the audience, then back. He said, "That's not fair. You don't know what it's like to do this every single night, to keep a show running, to keep people employed, to balance what you want to say with what you can say." Costner nodded. He said, "You're right. I don't know what that's like, but I know what it's like to have other people's livelihoods depending on your decisions. Every film I make, there are hundreds of people whose jobs exist because I'm fighting to get that film made. So when I refuse to compromise, when I push back against studios or financiers, I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about everyone who's counting on this project to be something worth their time." Jimmy's posture changed. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, elbows on his desk. He said, "So what are you saying? That I've sold out? That I'm not being true to myself?" Costner shook his head. He said, "I'm saying that everyone in this industry faces those choices. Everyone has moments where they have to decide what matters more, the approval or the work, and I'm not judging you for the choices you've made. But you came at me for the choices I've made, and I'm not going to apologize for them." There was a long pause. Then Jimmy said something that surprised everyone. He said, "You know what? You're right. I did come at you. And maybe it's because seeing someone who's still willing to burn bridges over principles reminds me of things I've let go of." "Is that what you want to hear?" Costner looked at him carefully and said, "I don't want you to say anything you don't mean, Jimmy. But if that's true, if that's really how you feel, then maybe this conversation is more important than either of us thought it would be." The audience was hanging on every word. Now, this had transformed into something completely different from where it started. Jimmy ran his hand through his hair and said, "This is not how I expected this interview to go." Costner smiled, a real smile this time. He said, "When does anything worth talking about go the way you expect?" Jimmy actually laughed at that, a genuine laugh, and said, "Fair point. All right, let me ask you this then. Seriously, how do you do it? How do you stay true to whatever your vision is when everyone's telling you to just make it easier? Make it faster? Make it more commercial?" Costner settled back in his chair. He said, "You stop listening to everyone. Not in an arrogant way, but you learn to filter. You figure out who actually knows what they're talking about, who's giving you advice based on making things better versus making things easier for them. And then you trust yourself. You trust that the instinct that got you here, that made you successful in the first place, that instinct is worth protecting. The moment you start second-guessing everything because other people are uncomfortable with your certainty, that's when you lose it." Jimmy nodded slowly. He said, "But what about when you're wrong? What about when your instinct leads you to make something that fails?" Costner didn't hesitate. He said, "Then you fail and you learn from it. But at least you fail doing something you believed in." "I've had failures, Jimmy. Projects that didn't work out the way I hoped. But I can look at every single one of them and say, I gave it everything. I can't say that about the projects where I compromised, where I let someone else's fear or doubt change what I was trying to do. Those are the ones that haunt you. Not the failures, but the almosts. The ones where you wonder what it could have been if you just held on a little longer." Jimmy was quiet, processing. Then he said, "That's a lonely way to work though, isn't it? Always being the one pushing against everyone else." Costner considered this. He said, "Sometimes, yes, but you know what's lonelier? Being surrounded by people who are just telling you what you want to hear. Being successful at something that doesn't mean anything to you. I'd take the loneliness of fighting for something real over the emptiness of coasting any day. The conversation had shifted completely. Jimmy wasn't trying to score points anymore, wasn't playing to the audience. He said, I think a lot of people watching this are going to say, you're being too idealistic. That the real world doesn't work that way. What do you say to them? Costner leaned forward. He said, I say the real world works exactly the way we let it work. Every person who settles, who compromises on things that matter to them, they're voting for a world where that's acceptable. And every person who draws a line, who says, no, this is what I stand for, they're voting for something different. You don't change industries or cultures by going along with how things are. You change them by being stubborn enough to insist on something better. Jimmy smiled, but it was thoughtful now, not performative. He said, you make it sound simple. Costner shook his head. He said, it's not simple at all. It's the hardest thing you can do. It costs you opportunities, relationships. Sometimes it costs you years of your life waiting for the right situation instead of taking what's available. But the alternative, living with the weight of all those compromises, all those moments where you knew better but didn't act on it, that costs you something too. It costs you yourself. The audience was completely silent, absorbed. Jimmy looked down at his desk, then back up at Costner. He said, I brought you on here tonight thinking I was going to have some fun at your expense. Maybe get some viral clips of you being defensive. I'm not proud of that, but I'm being honest. And instead, you've made me think about things I haven't thought about in a long time. I don't know if I'm grateful for that or annoyed by it. Costner laughed, and this time it was warm. He said, you can be both. Most important things make you feel both. Jimmy nodded and said, all right, last question, and I'm asking this genuinely. Do you ever worry that you're being too hard on people? That maybe some of us are doing the best we can with the circumstances we're in? Costner took a deep breath. He said, Jimmy, I'm not trying to be hard on anyone. I'm trying to tell the truth as I see it. And yes, everyone's doing the best they can, but best doesn't mean you can't do better. It doesn't mean you can't push yourself further. The question isn't whether you're doing your best within the system. It's whether the system itself is asking too little of you, whether you've adjusted your expectations down to match what's easy instead of keeping them high and finding ways to reach them. He continued, and here's the thing. I'm not special. I'm not some superhuman who has willpower that other people don't have. I'm just someone who decided a long time ago that I'd rather live with the consequences of my choices than the regret of not making them. Anyone can do that. Anyone watching this right now can decide that whatever area of their life they care about, they're going to stop compromising on it. They're going to stop accepting less than what they know is possible. It won't be easy, and people will call them difficult or stubborn or unrealistic, but at the end of it, they'll be able to look in the mirror and recognize who's looking back. Jimmy sat with that for a moment. Then he said, Kevin Costner, everyone, I don't know what else to say except thank you for keeping it real even when I wasn't. The audience erupted in applause, louder than any point in the interview. Costner stood up, shook Jimmy's hand, and you could see in that handshake something had shifted. This wasn't just television anymore. This was two people who'd pushed past the performance and found something genuine. As Costner walked off stage, Jimmy turned to the camera and said something off script. He said, we'll be right back, but honestly, I need a minute to process that. And you could tell he meant it. The interview was over, but the impact of it was just beginning. Social media exploded. Think pieces were written. People took sides, debated, argued about who was right, who was wrong, whether Costner had been too harsh, or whether he'd said what needed to be said. But the real story wasn't about who won or lost. It was about what happens when someone refuses to play the game. When they insist on substance over style, on truth over comfort. Kevin Costner had walked into that studio and done something rare in modern entertainment. He'd been completely, unapologetically himself. And in doing so, he challenged everyone watching to ask themselves a question. What are you compromising on? What are you settling for? And is it worth it? If this story made you think about your own life, about the places where you've drawn lines or maybe should draw them, make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. What's one thing you refuse to compromise on no matter what? Let's keep this conversation going.